knowledge. He learned from that experience. And I believe in that deposition, if I remember him, I don't know who took it, but I think he pretty much shared how important that meeting was with you guys.
Yeah, he told us he got no fish. And he brought no benefit back. That's what he told us. I'm asking you, what evidence do you have that Mr. McAfee brought some economic benefit back to Anderson County as a result of the two trips we just talked about in October 2000?
The economic development officials in Anderson County, including myself, often would go on trips in order to try to bring a fish to the community, and you didn't always land one. I think the important thing was to continue.
So is the answer you don't have any evidence that these two particular trips brought back any benefit to the county? Answer?
I don't have any personal knowledge of it.
Let me show you. Mark, exhibit number 40. You know who Heather Jones is?
I do.
Who is she?
Former economic development director for the county.
Would you agree with me that you participated with Heather Jones in backdating certain documents that went in Heather Jones' personnel file?
No.
Oh? Did you ever have knowledge that documents in Heather Jones' personnel file were backdated?
Yeah, I mean, backed up. I need to. Would you show me the documents?
I'm just asking what you remember.
Yeah.
First, I'll show you the documents in a minute. What do you remember about backdating of documents?
I remember towards sometime in November that she contacted me and approval I had given her when I first hired her in order to be able to drive the county jail. There's something about some training, I believe, and what that was about the trip.
Did you work with Heather Jones in any way to backdate certain documents that ultimately ended up in her personnel file?
I asked her she asked me about her travel, her vehicle, and I can't recall, I told her, she asked me if this email that she had sent me when I first hired her back in, I believe it was 2006. She sent me a list of her, it was a memorandum of understanding, I believe, of what we were to provide her as the incoming economic development director. And I signed off on that. And I placed it in her PAF, and we sent it to personnel. And I can't recall exactly how she asked me about that. If I had a copy of it, I think I might have told her that it should be in her personnel file. I believe she asked, contacted personnel, and they couldn't locate it.
So ultimately a document was created that was backdated and then put in your file? Is that what you're understanding?
It was to memorialize what we had agreed on.
Let me show you. Let me show you exhibit 41 first.
Right.
Those that are contained within exhibit 41.
There's an email where I told her, all right, this is the vehicle, this is the memorandum, the agreement that we had when we first hired her, and she said it was not in her file.
And what you're referencing is, just for the record, plaintiffs, it's marked PLF 774.
Yes, right.
The date on that document is what?
October the 16th.
2008. In exchange between you and Heather Jones in November 2008, correct?
Yeah, I don't know if we could have had these in October too. I just don't know. It says here. I have an email from her dated November 26th about the October 15th email. And I know that.
Well, look at page. It's in exhibit 41. If you look at the page on the bottom is marked PLF 773 and 774. You agree that is an email you received from Heather Jones on Wednesday, November 26, 2008, with an attached memo
Yes.
And it says, she's saying to
Oh.
you,
Yeah.
you told me to draft a memo that you could put in my permanent file, as well as give me a copy of that granted you use of a take-home vehicle. Here's the draft, and she provided you a draft, correct?
What do you have two of these in for? It's October the 16th, it's the same email.
Well, the one she sent you by email is dated October 16, 2008, right?
That's right, that's one that I signed.
Well, it's not the one you signed, because when you signed,
Right, it's on
dated.
down, right, that's it.
Because the next one, if you look at the 2 pages I showed you, she's plaintiff 773 and plaintiff 774. What she first sent you was a draft document that had a date of October 16, 2008 on it, right?
Right.
And then the next page that you see is another email from Heather Jones to you on November 26, 2008, with a subject line, corrected date on vehicle memo. You see that? You have to go back one page. It's PLF 769.
No, that way. Gotcha.
That's an email from Heather Jones to you on Wednesday, November 26, 2008 at 1:59 p.m., right?
Right.
And it attaches a document, which if you look at the next page, plaintiff 770, it's the same memo we just looked at, but this one has a date of October 16, 2006.
Right, that's when she started to work with me. That's right.
And the very next page, plaintiff 776, is your signature on that memo.
That's right.
So you signed that on November 26, 2008, right?
I believe I did, yes, sir.
And then, even though it's dated October 16, 2006, correct?
To memorialize what I'd already signed earlier that she couldn't find in her personnel file.
And why, Mr. Preston, didn't you just put something in her personnel file that indicated what you just told me?
You know, I don't know, there was just a lot going on at the time. We were trying to tie up loose ends, and this was not high on my radar at the time. And whatever I did, if I remember correctly, I believe in most cases, I would always let Michael know pretty much what I was doing. No one had any objections to that. I mean, the thing is, we already agreed to it. The personnel department, that memorandum is probably there in the personnel department today, unless they've cleaned their files and cleaned it out. But we had agreed to this. She was a highly professional individual. She gave me a list of what she wanted to go to work for the county, and I signed off on it, including the vehicle. And even after I left, if they wanted to take the vehicle away from her, they could, but they didn't. And she continued to drive the vehicle home, just like every other economic development director the county had ever hired to work for the county. I mean,
One other option in terms of trying to correct her personnel file, other than backdating the
I
document.
could have just not, just signed it that day, I guess. It really didn't matter. I didn't see it as being a big issue.
But you're the one who told her to make sure she put the right date on it.
My thoughts were, is that's the time that she went to work for the county, that's when it should be. But I could have done it then, or I did do it then. I thought either put the date on there because that's the time I originally did it, or I could just put whatever that current date was. It just wasn't that big of an issue.
Yes.
Okay. And the scope of things, this was,
Would you agree with me that exhibit number 40, the cover page of it is an email you received from Heather Jones on December 1st, 2008?
yes.
By this time, you are no longer acting as county administrator, correct?
That's right.
And she indicates that she forgot something and would like approval to attend what she called mission trip to Germany, right?
Yes.
And the next page of the document shows your response to her at the bottom of the page, basically, where you say to her, get me the letter to approve, date it early last week. That's what you told her, right?
Yes.
And you told her that because by dating it a week earlier than the actual date, that would put it at a time when you were acting as county.
If I'm not mistaken, my recollection was I discussed this with Michael and he was okay with it.
You didn't say that in this email, did you?
No, I didn't.
What you had her do.
I remember he and I talking. I'm almost 90% sure we discussed it.
Shouldn't Mr. Cunningham then have been the person to sign off on this request
He should have been.
on December 1st, 2008?
Right.
But instead, what you had Ms. Jones do was backdate the document for you to approve effective November 17th.
And I think my conversation with her about this is it really didn't matter whatever I sent her, because if she wanted to get on this training, she was, number one, she knew she was going to have to find money in the budget to do it, and she was going to have to get Michael to approve it again in the future. I don't know if she ever did this on this trip.
Were you at Caters Lake in March of 2006 with Kelly Nichols?
Yes.
Why were you at Caters Lake in March of 2006 with Kelly Nichols?
Back up a little bit. There was an ongoing investigation that's pretty obvious, and there's lots in the record for that. That particular evening, that Friday night, I believe it was Friday night, I can't recall if it was exactly or not, but they had been doing surveillance on people that had been following us around, harassing Ms. Nichols and other county council members. And that night, a group of us were to gather over at Sullivan's, and at dinner, Ms. Nichols, who didn't think too kindly of the lady named Jenna Trammell, one of the people at the table, started mentioning and talking about what a wonderful person Ms. Jenna Trammell was, and Ms. Nichols stood up and she got angry, said some things to the person, and she stormed off. And then probably about 10 minutes later, she called me and told me that she was being followed by someone, and that she wanted me to know that, and she wanted me to follow her home, I believe, to begin with, and to let me know that they were doing that. So prior to that, Tim Boucher, who was the chief deputy, was kind of leading that investigation, and along with another detective who I don't think is any longer at the sheriff's office. And I asked her where she was, and she was riding in the vicinity of the courthouse, and I got in my car, and I followed her, and I called Mr. Boucher. I don't know that she said she was being followed, which I believe that could have actually been happening, because I actually witnessed it myself, and I know the sheriff's office on a couple of different occasions had identified an individual who in fact was following Ms. Nichols around, and myself.
Are you saying you saw that she was being followed that particular night, or you're saying you saw that she was being followed on other prior occasions?
I knew that we were.
On other prior occasions?
Yes, that's right.
This particular night,
She said she was.
what happened after she called you and told you she was in the vicinity of the courthouse? What happened
And
then?
I told her I would get in my car and I called him, and I did.
And what did you talk to Mr. Boucher about?
Well, he was, I don't know where he was, but it sounded like he was pretty busy. A lot going on, something had happened in the county, wherever he was. But I told him that Kelly Nichols said that she was being followed, and she was delirious. She said they've been following her around for a while. And we're going down 81. And, I can understand that she was really emotional. And she turned, actually, he told me, he said, just pull into a shopping center or just turn left somewhere down the street. That's what I did. I told her, hung up, I told her, we pulled into the park. It was a public park, and it was fairly well lit.
And then what happened?
We settled. And I didn't know if Tim was what he was going to do, so he called me back. He didn't call me back that night.
He didn't call you back at all that night?
No. So we sat there, and probably about 5 or 10 minutes. And we got in the car and walked down towards the lake. And we stood there right there in the light. And we were there, we were talking. She was emotional, talking about her experience with Ms. Trammell and the crap that was going on with her. And all of a sudden, some blue lights come on, and the police were there, and they're all through the park. And I tell her, let's go. And we go back to the car, and we get in the car, and the policeman pulled up behind me. And I get out of the car, and he waves me on past him.
And this was, the police officers that you saw at Caters Lake that evening were all Anderson City police, correct?
Right.
The undercover operation that you're talking about with Mr. Boucher, he was deputy sheriff, wasn't he? What was his position in the county?
Deputy.
Deputy
Chief
sheriff?
deputy.
Chief deputy, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
The undercover operation you're talking about with Mr. Fouché was one run by Anderson County Sheriff's Department, correct?
There wasn't any particular undercover operation going on though. I don't know where that crap came from at the radio station. I think they labeled it that for the most part. But I called him and he told me to turn left, and it was right in the, we turned left in Decatur's Lake and pulled in there and parked. And then sure enough, when the police showed up, I didn't know who called or what had happened. I go home and we leave, we go home, and I get 2 phone calls at my house from 2 people that say, hey, we just busted you at Decatur's Lake and we're going to get you, that kind of thing. And I try to call Tim again, I can't get him. I don't know what's happening with it, and I go to bed. And then next morning I get up and all of a sudden those people on calling Paul Brown and saying I got caught at Decatur's Lake doing something bad.
You told the county council on March 21st, 2006, at that county council meeting, among other things, you said a little over 2 weeks ago, as part of that investigation, the Sheriff's Department directed my involvement in an operation designed to more fully ascertain the identities of those involved. And you were talking about, when you said a little over 2 weeks ago, you were talking about the
overall,
night at Decatur's Lake.
No, the overall operation. This thing had been going on for weeks. It went on for weeks before that, and then even a little bit after that. And I think when Decatur's Lake came about, 2 of the individuals were completely identified, and they already had another one. They were looking for one more, but that never did turn up.
And what you said, and I'll read you one extra sentence. You said first, thankfully, as I mentioned earlier, law enforcement has been involved for quite some time and has made a great deal of progress in the ongoing investigation.
Right.
A little over 2 weeks ago, as part of that investigation, the Sheriff's Department directed my involvement in an operation designed to more fully ascertain the identities of those involved.
Right.
So what did the Sheriff's Department direct you to, how did they direct your involvement in an operation a little over 2 weeks prior to March 21st, 2006?
You go sit down in Sullivan's and sit there while these 2 guys were out there, one sitting in the restaurant and another across the street, so they could see exactly what was going on, because we had seen those, these people would come in and take pictures and all kinds of things, and at that point in time, we would get letters, threatening letters in the mail, and I mean, it was nasty.
So the Sheriff's Department directing you to do something was when they directed you to go to Sullivan's that night, right?
Yes, with that, and to do other things too. I mean, to be other places.
Did they direct you to go to Decatur's Lake?
Earlier on in the night, that wasn't part of the plan. I mean, we didn't know, or when Kelly was part of the, she was a hot spot too, and they were trying to find out if she and I were having an affair, is what I think, at that particular time. So they showed up, and they would continuously show up anytime we were together to try to nail us doing something.
Did you have an adulterous relationship with Kelly Nichols at any time?
Yes.
What time?
8 years.
And you're the person who hired Kelly Nichols to work for the county, right? When she first started?
John Loomis recommended hiring her.
But you're the person who ultimately pulled the trigger, so to speak. You had the authority to hire her, correct?
Yeah, some of it.
Would you agree that as the county administrator, if you were having a sexual affair with a subordinate county employee, that could cause problems for the county?
It could, yes, sir.
Do you think that would be grounds for your termination of your appointment?
No.
Did you ever have to talk to any investigators about credit card, the county's credit card for the Holiday Inn?
Yes.
And that involved Kelly Nichols, did it not?
Yes.
And in fact, that day you had a tryst with Kelly Nichols at the Holiday Inn, right?
No.
You said to the investigators that the room was set up for State Representative Mr. Scott.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes.
Did you meet Kelly Nichols in that room that day?
No.
Back in December 2007, you had this event where Mr. Walter and Ms. Wilson came to the finance department looking for financial records of the county. You recall that? You talked about that a little bit.
Yes.
Who instructed the county employees in the finance department to prevent Ms. Wilson and Mr. Walker from reviewing those financial records?
It was Gina Humphries.
And was that at your direction, or did she do that on her own?
She did it on her own.
She told them they could have whatever they wanted or see whatever they wanted to see with me to get the proper procedures.
And the proper procedure would have been to go through you or get
Yeah.
approval from you?
Yes.
And ultimately, did they do that?
Ultimately, later on, yes.
Did Gina Humphries at some point write up a description of the encounter that occurred in December '07 where Ms. Wilson and Mr. Waldrop came to the finance department?
I believe the entire finance department did, including her.
Did you have any involvement in instructing them or advising them to write up the encounter?
I instructed her to, because Walter threatened her. And she took it on her own to get stated. She had reports.
Exhibit 41 is an email from Heather Jones to you dated November 26, 2008, correct?
Yes.
What does the subject line say?
To-do list.
During the time period reflected by this email, were you doing a bunch of cleanup?
Yes, sir, I was.
Why were you doing a bunch of cleanup?
Council directed me to clean up because they wanted me to get the items that needed to get done before Mr. Cunningham took office.
Was the cleanup intended to help Mr. Cunningham's transition be more seamless?
Yes, it was.
When was Heather Jones hired by the county?
I believe in 2006, I believe.
And when did Heather Jones first receive a vehicle from the county?
2006, as soon as she was hired.
When did Heather Jones leave the county, do you know?
Probably about a year and a half after I left.
And to your knowledge, was she still using a county vehicle when she left the county?
Yes.
Were education